Hello and welcome to the Feel Freaking Amazing podcast. I'm Wendy Trubo. This is Ed Levitan. I said to him before the show started that it was like a rare animal sighting in the wild that we have Ed with us today. So enjoy the ride. We have an amazing guest today. We have Robert Lufkin, MD. He's a physician, medical school professor at UCLA and USC, and he focuses on the applied science of health, longevity, and consciousness. He's the author of over 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and 14 books that are available in 6 languages. And after reversing his own chronic disease and transforming his life, he's making it his mission to help others do the same. So Robert, welcome. We love you to pieces. He's one of our colleagues and friends, and we're so happy to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Wendy. And I love you guys. I'm a huge fan. I love what you're doing. It's an inspiration, and it's truly an honor and a pleasure to be on the show today. I'm so excited.
Well, let's dive in. Tell me, did your mess become your message? How'd you get into this?
Yeah, well, let me say, first of all, I'm not a medical conspiracy theorist or anything. I'm really mainstream medicine. I've spent my whole career in a medical school. I do research. I get money from drug companies. I do all the things that the establishment does. But and one other thing, I'm going to be critical of the medical care system, but I want to go on record as saying that I think the Western healthcare system is, unequaled for the benefits it's given for mankind, really, in the 20th century. Public health, infectious diseases, many, many things Western medicine is good for. If I get a renal stone, a calculus, or if I get hit by a bus outside and I need a blood transfusion and a splenectomy, I may think about lifestyle and different things like that, which may help me recover. But what will save my life is, the Western medicine. So
wait, we got to talk about this because you're really highlighting something that I say to patients, and I'm assuming you say to patients all the time, which is, let's use the right tool for the problem. So if you need emergency care, obstetric care, surgery, if you have a life-threatening thing, you don't want to be in the functional medicine world. You want to be in the traditional system. But then if you want to live long, be well, and thrive, then you want to go outside the system, because the system is designed for reactive care and we're looking for proactive, feel freaking amazing care. So I think you're really highlighting use the right tool, not the wrong tool.
Totally. Yeah. And in the 21st century, 80% of healthcare is on what are called chronic diseases that don't necessarily respond to the same pills and surgery that are applied to the acute conditions that you mentioned, and that's what I'm focusing on. But to your question, how did I get here? I was minding my own business, being a medical school professor, and then, like so many people in this space, I came down with 4 chronic diseases that were very common diseases.
Well, only 4? You're kind of underachiever, right? I just came down with 4. You're sort of a hair. You should do a hair flip if I came down with 4.
Only 4.
We have a criteria here. We only accept 6 or above. So
forget about it.
4, sorry, you have to leave now. We apologize.
Well, there were probably more coming, and that's part of how my philosophy's changed too. I think they're all coming, and we need to think about all of them now because we're all on the path to them. But anyway, I came down with 4 diseases, and I went to my doctor and I was prescribed medicines for them. And I asked, what about lifestyle? I hear about lifestyle. They said, it doesn't really work. You need to be on these pills for the rest of your life. Get used to it. And I realized, I had 2 young daughters. I realized this wasn't going to end well. So it forced me to examine my own beliefs and kind of dive deeply into, some of the work that you guys are doing and others. And I realized there's been a lot of controlled studies and a lot of breakthroughs in information that I wasn't aware of. And even my colleagues that, still teach things are missing something important here. And long story short, I was able to reverse these diseases with powerful tools about lifestyle. And I wanted to make this information available to everybody so that other people don't make the same mistakes that I made.
That's really cool. Did you have a question? Because I have a question.
Go for it.
I know you focus a lot on obesity and artificial sweeteners. So I know you referenced something called the obesity lie. So can you talk about what is that? Like, what is that? Where did it come from? And what do we do about it?
Yeah, the obesity is, it's exploding. The obesity epidemic. There are more obese people, even corrected for population, than there ever have been in history. And in fact, in the United States, I think most people are either overweight or obese now. And this has really only happened in the last about 30 years. So it's a problem. And then obesity, of course, is a risk factor for all the other chronic diseases that we'll talk about probably. But the obesity lie, one thing that struck me about obesity is if you go to my institutions, my medical schools, or other health organizations, if I'm obese, I will be given the recommendations that to exercise more and eat less, and that just eat less because a calorie is just a calorie. And I don't think that's right. I think it's wrong. It's obviously not working for people. Exercise has many, many health benefits, but weight loss is not one of them. Just because if you look at the math, doing the calories, the number of calories you burn on a marathon versus eating a muffin, it's difficult to burn those calories. And secondly, exercising increases one's appetite typically, so it actually makes it worse. And then just the idea that a calorie is a calorie and it's just a matter of eating less food overlooks the important concept that our body looks at macronutrients very differently. And so that a fat and protein calorie, which is essential for life, is very different from a carbohydrate calorie, which is non-essential for life, and also spikes insulin, which is the fat storage hormone. So rather than just looking at, I just need to eat fewer things, I can actually eat the same number of calories. But if I shift the types of food I eat, I can actually lose weight, and that can help many people on their obesity challenges.
I mean, okay, so first off, for the listeners, we found out that we both lived in the same town. I don't know how many years you lived in Framingham, but I grew up in Framingham, a total townie, and he lived in Framingham and went to high school there. So the reason I bring that up is I remember in the house I grew up in, my mom still had her wedding gown. I don't know why she had that. I mean, she was like long divorce. I don't know why she had her wedding gown, but one time I was a teenager and I was like, oh, I'm going to try on your wedding gown because, I was a teenager apparently. And so I couldn't get into it. It was too small. And I was a little bit bigger than I am now. I was sort of not round, but I was healthy, shall we say. And I couldn't fit into her wedding dress. And so we started to talk about how people are actually bigger now than they were. Even, when she got married 50 years ago, 55 years ago. And I've even seen it, so this is where it comes back to toxins, that these toxins sit in your fat and your bones and your brain and your organs. And if you can't get rid of them, you can't get rid of your fat. So you're now like, it isn't a calorie in, calorie out issue. It's an exposure, lifestyle, stress, adrenal, gut, liver dysfunction issue. And
absolutely. And there, many obesogens that are drivers of obesity, including, toxins that you guys talk about in your book and your work, that, even controlling what we eat isn't always enough if there are toxins in our lives and other factors, even things like stress or sleep abnormalities or other things that can drive obesity above and beyond just what we put in our mouth. So it's very complex.
I'm curious about food. I'm sorry. Feel free to jump in at any time. If a married man has an opinion, how does he want to express it? Feel free to jump in. So you mentioned, you could simply switch your calories to same calories, different input. What are you referring to when you say that? Are you saying like 10 pounds of tomatoes and kale instead of, a pound of meat? Like, what do you really mean by that?
Well, like as an example, if you take 140 calories with 2 hard-boiled eggs, and you can have it as 2 hard-boiled eggs, which are largely fat and protein, or you can have 140 calories, which is just a handful of potato chips. Most people will, when they eat the potato chips, like me, I'm unable to stop and will consume the whole bag. But most people, when they eat 2 eggs, will stop at 2 eggs and they won't necessarily consume the whole carton of hard-boiled eggs because there are
Secret.
drivers.
My dirty little
there.
secret. The whole carton of eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
you're right.
actually, you have you have less of an urge to eat more. I mean, the carbohydrates drive a lot of satiety factors, and they make us eat more. Plus, by driving insulin, the energy that we consume is stored as fat, so it's not available for our metabolism. So it's actually as if we ate less. Whereas when we consume the fat and protein in the eggs, most of that energy is available for metabolism. In other words, it's not stored as fat typically.
So is your general recommendation to do like a ketogenic diet, or which is like next to no carbs, or is it just to really moderate the carbs and focus on
Or the type of carb even, not
on the type
keto,
of carbs?
but not potato chip, but just a potato or a sweet potato or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a matter of degrees, and I recognize that everybody's different, and we all we all have different things. What worked for me, I think, way to start is I didn't change what I ate. I just changed the when I ate. So instead of eating all day long and all night long, snacking between meals and many small meals, I stopped eating after dinner and stopped eating between meal snacks, and that improves one's health, improves their insulin resistance, improves your glucose sensitivity. Then I began, I even experimented with eliminating breakfast and lunch. And sometimes I just have one meal a day with my kids when they get home from school, and have a dinner meal. So that intermittent fasting works for many people, and it has beneficial metabolic effects by turning down mTOR and turning on autophagy as well. Then as far as to your point, what you asked, as far as actually what I eat, carbohydrates, because they drive insulin, and they drive the factors that drive insulin resistance and inflammation. For me, I cut out carbs, at least refined carbohydrates, which are sugars and starches. And for me, that works well. I feel great when I do it. My mind is much clearer. I don't have brain fog, and my hemoglobin A1C markers dropped, which was one of the conditions that I had, was pre-diabetes with a high A1C. So avoiding carbs helped reverse that. And then I avoid other types of food. 2 other things I avoid are industrial seed oils, which are processed oils that have a pro-inflammatory effect. And they're somewhat controversial because the American Heart Association was funded by the Procter & Gamble that when they started Crisco, and they still recommend seed oils and canola oil on their website as a heart healthy option. But I disagree with that, and I avoid seed oils in my diet. And then the last thing I do is, and this was a challenge, but I avoid grains also. I love baked goods, but for me, the evidence is pretty strong. I don't have gluten. I don't have a gluten allergy. I don't have celiac disease, but many experts, and there's evidence showing that a large percentage of people have allergies, low-grade allergies to proteins in grains, and that can drive inflammation. And along with the weed killer glyphosate that's in there,
You said the magic word so far in this talk.
Yeah, well,
we
got to hit some toxins here. Yeah. For that reason, I avoid
was
grains.
going for mTOR. You're going.
No, we're going to come back to, and we're definitely going to come back to mTOR. But do you remember when we were sitting? We sat in a lecture. We saw Fasano and Perlmutter in a lecture. This has to be 15 years ago because I was in some various stage of pregnant or nursing. I remember that.
That was long.
I was pregnant and nursing for 12 years. So just pick a time. So basically, I remember. So it was just hysterical because Perlmutter's a neurologist and Fasano is a gastroenterologist. And Fasano was talking all about brain health and Perlmutter was talking all about gut health. So it was just sort of this ironic crossover. But I remember one of them talking very clearly about that when you eat gluten, whether or not you have gluten sensitivity, when you eat gluten, if you don't have the genes, you open up your tight junctions in the gut for 15 minutes. Every time you eat gluten. And if you have a gluten sensitivity, meaning you have one of the genes for promoting celiac, DQ2 or DQ8, when you eat gluten, you open up your tight junctions for 4 hours. So you're right? Like even without, and 40% of the population has one or two of the genes. So, but even without the genes, if you eat gluten, you're opening up your tight junctions and exposing your inside world to the outside world, which means you're in a pro-inflammatory state because you've got leaky gut. Right there. So yeah, if you love your baked goods and you eat them morning, what'd you have for breakfast? Bagel. What'd you have for dinner? What pasta with chicken and broccoli, right? Like this is sort of standard meal. So, and then you layer on the glyphosate and you're really nailed. So you're right. I mean, it is a pro-inflammatory state. Before we get to mTOR, I promise we'll get to mTOR. Did you get the app Seed Oil Scout, which allows you to search for restaurants that don't use seed oils?
I'm a fan of Seed Oil Scout. I follow them on Twitter, and I'm looking. I found a restaurant that uses a tallow fryer near me where I live, and I'm going to go try them out. And I think that just by doing that movement, get the fast food companies to switch their fryers back to tallow, like they did, like they originally had before they switched to seed oils in the 90s, I guess. That in itself, I think, could be a big benefit for people.
We use duck fat. I was just saying to our oldest, she said, "Oh, I'm going to the store. Do we need anything from the store we buy our ducks at?" I'm like, "I don't know. Let me see if we need duck." So I looked in the freezer this morning. We have tons of duck. I want to make a duck. But when you make duck, it has all this fat. And so we collect it and then filter it just because it has a little bit of particulate matter from cooking. And then we use it to cook food. So we actually render our own duck fat, which is nice. It's kind of cool. It's like, okay.
Good old days.
And those, yeah, I haven't made duck in a while, but okay, you want to talk about mTOR?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're
I'm good. We're good. We can move on. We've mind.
All right, talk about what's mTOR. What is it? Why do we care?
Oh, yeah, I love this molecule. It's arguably first of all, mTOR wasn't discovered till the end of the 20th century. So it's relatively unknown, but arguably it's one of the single most important signaling molecules in all of biology, as evidenced by the fact that it's conserved over billions of years. In other words, it's present in yeast all the way to human beings. So it's fundamental for the survival of cells and organisms. So what does this do? mTOR is a metabolic switch that senses the presence of nutrients. And when nutrients are present, it tells the cell to grow. When nutrients are not present, it tells the cell to hunker down, turn down inflammation, turn on autophagy or repair, get rid of senescent cells. So normally an organism will go between states of, fast and famine, hunter-gatherers, whatever. And mTOR will normally be turned on for periods for growth and then turned off for repair. And that's the normal situation. The problem is, and there's an idea not only for chronic diseases, but also for longevity itself, that they're driven by a situation in the 21st century in human beings where mTOR is turned on too much. So it's sort of stuck in the growth mode. What does that mean? Well, mTOR is sensitive to glucose primarily and insulin. So it's sensing these carbohydrate type drivers, also sensitive to oxygen and things. And well, growth is good when you're a child and you're growing up. mTOR growth is healthy. There's very strong arguments that turning on mTOR all the time, like we're seeing now in the population, especially as people get older, not only drives the phenotypes of aging, wrinkles, gray hair, hearing loss, menopause, but it also drives the chronic diseases, obesity, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. And actually, when you look at longevity itself, mTOR is arguably one of the strongest drivers in longevity animal models. In other words, there's a drug you can give that specifically targets mTOR and turns it into this favorable position, this repair state. And you can also do it with lifestyle. Some of the things I mentioned, like fasting or dietary choices, avoiding toxins in your environment, turns mTOR into this favorable part. But so I would recommend lifestyle as first order, but having a drug that immediately switches mTOR off allows many, many scientific experiments to be done on all these phenotypes of aging and these chronic diseases and even longevity, and to document in a controlled fashion, does mTOR really have an effect on all this stuff like people think it does? Yes, question. You in the front row with a smile.
So are we trying to turn mTOR on for longevity, or are we trying to turn mTOR off for longevity?
Yeah, great question.
Which is the goal?
We want to turn mTOR on, which is growth and hyperfunction, when the organism is maturing, when the long bones are growing, the brain is maturing. But what the theory is that as animals get older, mTOR gets stuck in this on position all the time, this hyperfunction, and growth in an older organism doesn't result in long bone growth or brain maturation. It results in hyperstimulation, which drives these chronic diseases that that we're talking about, and also the phenotypes of aging, and also results in decreased longevity. So there's a drug, one drug that targets mTOR specifically and turns it in this off position. And that was how mTOR was discovered, really, as a result of the drug, because the drug was discovered first out in Easter Island in the 1960s in Rapa Nui. And it was discovered from bacteria there that make it. And they called the drug rapamycin after Rapa Nui. And then later on, they figured, wow, this drug is amazing. Its effects on cells, how does it work? And then 40 years later, they discovered mTOR, and mTOR, of course, stands for target of rapamycin, which is, and so rapamycin is a nice drug that we can use for controlled studies to see what the effect of turning mTOR down is. And when you look at the studies, they're nothing short of mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's a lot of David Sinclair's work and a lot of other people, and to be clear, some people are taking rapamycin on a regular basis these days.
It's FDA approved. It's actually FDA approved for atherosclerosis. It's FDA approved for cancer. It's it's under study for Alzheimer's disease, and it's FDA approved for many other things. But off-label use is for longevity. I take it for that, and
any downsides?
The longevity the first thing rapamycin was approved for was renal transplant immune suppression. So, and that's a daily dose, and it's still a frontline drug for that. So you don't want to take it on a daily fashion, and the longevity dose is once a week, and that as much as everyone can tell, there are tens to hundreds of thousands of people taking rapamycin now as this longevity tool, just because it's gotten very popular. It's sort of like metformin was 10 years ago.
Do you actually notice? Do you have like a noticeable difference, or is this more of a long-term game?
Yeah, with mTOR, the problem is there aren't tests to evaluate mTOR function there like there is with hemoglobin glycation with A1C or something. So there's no direct measurement. So you have indirect measurements. Some of the studies, they took rapamycin cream, a cream of rapamycin. They mix it with, they have a placebo, and they did a blinded study with people for 8 months. They did once a day. They rubbed it on the back of these people's hands. And then at the end of the study, they did punch biopsies of these people, these brave volunteers. But actually, they showed once a day application of rapamycin dramatically increased the basilar collagen layer and reversed the aging of the skin, which was.
Do we have it in skin stuff? Do we have it in like facial stuff?
Well, the FDA last year approved rapamycin cream as an indication, not for wrinkles and aging, but for angiomyolipomatosis, kind of a different condition. But it means it's available as a cream now, and many people are using it off-label for that. But
He's such a buzzkill, man.
yeah,
I mean,
it's like every single phenotype of aging you apply it to: wrinkles, gray hair, menopause. It delays menopause in the mouse model. It slows, it increases the number of pups they have, and it delays the onset of their menopause. It's now being studied in humans. They also do it for hearing loss. It slows down hearing loss, age-related hearing loss. It slows down periodontal disease, hair loss, gray hair. I mean, they're fascinating things with rapamycin. It's like, how can this one drug affect all these different things? And it's fascinating, but obviously you can say, well, hey, nobody dies of menopause, right? Nobody dies of gray hair or baldness, right? People die of, it's a short list. You, me, and all our listeners are probably going to die of one of about 5 things statistically. Number one is, heart attacks, and then you go down stroke, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. Well, if rapamycin, mTOR, is so fundamental in chronic disease and longevity, in particular, it should have an effect on these diseases, right? So what evidence do we have for it? Well, stents are the treatment today for heart attack. Which, in other words, if I have a heart attack, a stent, which is narrowing of the blood vessels to the heart, and blood doesn't get there. A stent is a mechanical way to open the blood vessel, and everyone, depending on their anatomy, they're most likely to get a stent today if they have acute infarct or acute heart attack. And the great thing about stents is they may be life-saving in the moment. The downside of stents is, like many of the surgeries or pills for these chronic diseases, they may save your life in the moment, but they don't have an effect on the long term on the disease. So you talk to a friend just got a stent, and he goes, "Hey, I'm great. I got a stent. They cured my heart attack. Wow, I dodged that bullet. Wow, thank you, modern medicine." Well, actually, what he didn't realize is, and many people don't realize, is that the stent will save your life, but it doesn't do anything to your underlying cardiovascular disease. As you know, it continues on. The rest of your blood vessels clot off, and even the stent will clot off. And that was a problem with stents, is they clot off with atherosclerosis eventually. So enter mTOR and rapamycin. They began coating the stents with rapamycin, and it's actually now FDA approved as the number one. It stops atherosclerosis from reoccurring in the stents. And and for that reason, many people are, looking at taking it orally as well for studies that way too. So atherosclerosis is a hyperfunction. If you think about it, it's not like wearing out of the blood vessel. It's actually hypergrowth, the proliferation of cells. So slowing that down by turning mTOR down has a beneficial effect there. The other big cause is cancer, and go ahead. Yeah.
No, finish your thought, and then I have a question for you.
Oh, no, I was going to say the other big killer is cancer. It's completely different from atherosclerosis, right? They're completely different animals, but they're the number one and number two killers for all of us statistically that determine literally our longevity, how long we live in these chronic diseases. Well, what does rapamycin do for cancer, if anything? Well, as it turns out, it does a lot. And there's a human model for cancer is people who have heart transplants. The number one, something I didn't know, the number one cause of death in a heart transplant patient is not transplant rejection within the first 5 years of life, but it's actually a cancer, a malignancy due to the immune suppression from the drugs. And rapamycin is one of the common drugs used, but other drugs are used. So what they did was they took these heart transplants patients and they looked at the ones on rapamycin versus the ones on other immunosuppressants. And the ones on rapamycin had a dramatically lower, 30% lower malignant rate, presumably due to the rapamycin. The evidence is so strong, the FDA now has 8 FDA indications for cancer. For example, metastatic renal cell cancer, rapamycin is indicated as adjunctive therapy, the number one kidney cancer, and many others. So it also works on cancer. And then, excuse me, there's evidence it works on Alzheimer's disease. And And it's just it's amazing these different effects, but somehow they're tied into mTOR and growth and inflammation.
Sorry, just quick. Does it have any effect on IGF-1?
Pardon me?
Any effect on IGF-1 or like growth hormone? It seems like it would be tied in closely.
Absolutely. And it may sound like we understand mTOR and we've got it figured out. Well, we don't. This stuff is so complex. David Sinclair is a friend. He talks about sirtuins and different NAD supplements, or resveratrol. There are other people who use metformin that affects AMP kinase, is another signaling molecule, very basic one, similar to mTOR. And mTOR is affected by it primarily is affected by, it senses insulin-like growth factor, like I said, oxygen, all these other things. So the things that you mentioned that are anabolic things will tend to turn mTOR on. So the favorable state of mTOR is this essentially a catabolic state where we break things down, we repair things, we repair our cells, and we turn inflammation way down when mTOR is turned down. So that seems to be the favorable state. But the short answer is nobody really knows. It's kind of the Wild West, but changes are happening really fast. Our understanding is advancing at light speed.
That's so cool. Okay. Talk to me about menopause. Do you have any focus on menopause? Because sure, some people want to delay it, but once you're in menopause, is there and women tend to become almost overnight insulin resistant and start to pack on fat. So between the food choices and the rapamycin, have you seen anything for menopausal women? Because asking for a friend.
Menopause is certainly important, and there's growing evidence that this metabolically healthy lifestyle, which includes avoiding toxins which damage our metabolism, will have favorable effects on menopause. And I'm not an expert on menopause, but just what the animal models with mTOR and rapamycin on delaying menopause is really interesting. And now rapamycin is being used in clinical studies with women who are interested in extending their fertility or delaying menopause and all these things. And we have a fertility crisis, that people say, well, hey, why do you want to live longer? Why do you want to increase your lifespan? Because, I grew up in the era when we were all taught there was a population explosion and that we were going to overpopulate the earth. And now, sadly, it appears that's not our problem. Our problem is declining birth rates to even serious levels in Europe and Japan and Korea and China. And so increasing fertility and increasing longevity may, to some extent, make up for fewer births, but it's a new world out there.
Right. I just want to make sure we're talking longevity means increasing not only lifespan but health span. So that
Correct.
We're actually healthy as we age, not right now where the last bit of life is in an ICU or a nursing home. We're talking about a healthy, vibrant life.
Exactly. Nobody wants 10 extra years if it's in a nursing home, right? Yeah. So when we say lifespan, it's implied a healthy lifespan, and that's what people are finding out. Nir Barzilai is a colleague who's been active with metformin for longevity, and he has a supercentenarians project in New York where he studies 100-year-olds and 110-year-olds, and he looks for how they got to be that age. And sadly there weren't a lot of genes that did it, which is good news, that no matter what our parents are like, we can still change our lifespan with longevity. But the other thing he found, to your point, was that these older people that lived so much longer, it wasn't that they didn't get chronic disease, and it wasn't that they got it and got it for a long time. It's just they delayed the onset of it. Once they got their cancer or their heart disease or whatever, they they went just like the rest of us, it was so, but the point was they were able to delay the onset of these chronic diseases. And that's what the hope is with longevity, with these longevity programs as well.
I've been noticing this in my clinical practice. In med school, we were taught average age of menopause is 51 and perimenopause is 45. And I've noticed a huge uptick in an earlier menopause and an earlier perimenopause. So I'm getting women in my practice who are 38 to 42, and they are clearly perimenopausal and their FSH is on the rise. And then they're hitting menopause at 48 now instead of 50. Like it's like a shift, which is just very interesting to see because it's happened in my career. Literally in my career, I've seen the shift. So we're talking 25 years I've seen the shift. And fertility too, that I have a couple people who get pregnant with no problem. In fact, one of them is my patient who had breast cancer, recurrent breast cancer, had a mastectomy, had tons of detox work. We spent a year doing detox on her. And she got pregnant, no problem. And that so many other people have challenges with either sperm count or conception. And it seems to me much more. It seems to be much more than it used to be. Like I mean, I grew up with people who had teen pregnancies, and it's a lot less. I don't know. It just seems less now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to pick your brain about microplastics. It's an area that I'm really excited about, and I want to get into it. I know you guys are going to come on our podcast, and I'd love to talk to you about all this stuff. It is so fascinating, and and you guys are the experts on it. So I can't. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You talk about in your book, Changing Subjects, you talk about de-prescribing. What is that?
Yeah, de-prescribing is something I wasn't familiar with. The usual thing is when people go on a prescription, especially for these chronic diseases, they're given a pill. Like they told me, the expectation is that you go on it for life, and there aren't any options of getting off of it. So what's happening is with these dramatic lifestyle changes that I talk about in the book, and that help me so much, and that others are doing as well. These lifestyle changes can actually change the need for prescription medicines to the point that in some cases, like in my case, I was able to go off them. And I'm certainly not recommending anyone change their prescriptions without involving their healthcare provider. But this is done in concert with the healthcare provider as you go through the lifestyle changes. And it's not unusual for de-prescribing to occur with a lot of things that we can do. So a lot of these pills can be replaced by just removing toxins or having an appropriate lifestyle.
Yes.
So don't try this at home. That's doctor speak for don't try this at home. Try it with your functional medicine doctor.
Yes.
So Robert,
absolutely.
Are you still teaching at medical school?
Yeah, I have an appointment at USC, which is my primary appointment now, in radiology, which is medical imaging. But I'm mainly now I'm focused on kind of reaching out to regular people and getting the message out through, social media, books, and different things like that.
What is the when you talk to professors and medical students, what is the reception to this? Because when we went to medical school, there
in the dark ages, there was electricity.
Deep dark ages. When they were still using ether, right?
Yep.
There was just no reception to anything like this. This was complete nonsense, basically.
There's still a lot of resistance. The calorie lie, the obesity, just eat less and exercise more. The American Diabetes Association still posts, high sugar recipes on their website, and they say just cover it with insulin. While one of their biggest sponsors is DaVita, which makes dialysis units, and the number one cause of needing a dialysis unit is of course type 2 diabetes, which in my opinion is made worse by eating sugar, even if you cover it with insulin.
I'm not sure that's just your opinion. Just to be clear.
No. I mean, many people disagree, and there's a lot of different opinions you asked about medical school. My colleagues, I think intelligent people can disagree on, can agree to disagree. And I just hope that everyone is open-minded and they take a look at the evidence. And to be clear, this is not my research. It's not something I discovered. I'm in the book. It's heavily illustrated with pictures and stuff, so it's accessible to lay people. But it's also heavily referenced with about 400 references of which are primary citations of the original controlled study. So if you want to dive deeply and look at the evidence, you'll see the evidence at least that changed my mind in the book, and you can show it to your physician if that helps, if they're open-minded about it. But that's the nature of medicine, and science, as we all know, that it's constantly changing, and we just have to be open-minded to new ideas. And what I'm seeing is people aren't open-minded as they could be, and a lot of these ideas, I think, are not getting out, and harm is being done to patients as a result of that.
We're certainly grateful that you're part of that message, because there's just not enough people to bring that message out. So super grateful to you to helping bring that out.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think people ask me, are you depressed writing this book? It's like, actually, I'm hopeful and inspired, because I think it's a new era of medicine where I, as a patient, finally get to take control of my life. I'm the CEO of my own life. And sure, I take my doctor's advice, but I also realize that for most of these chronic diseases, the most powerful medicine that I will ever get access to is lifestyle. And that's something that's in my control. A doctor won't make me healthy. A doctor will just make me less sick. If I want to be healthy, I have to do it myself. And the way I do it with lifestyle, and by lifestyle, I mean broadly cleaning up toxins also, and the whole thing. But that's lifestyle is empowering. It gives me agency, and I wake up every morning and I can think, wow, this is a new day. I'm going to clean up my environment. I'm going to decide what I eat. I'm going to decide when I exercise, when I sleep, and I'm going to make my health better. And that to me is good news.
So I have a question, because you have access to a lot of this, just like we do. Like, we can do stuff on our own. So when someone's just starting this evaluation process and journey, what are the health assessments that you're recommending, and why do you recommend them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's key to be hooked up to a good healthcare provider partner. And what does that mean? Well, in my mind, it means a functional medicine specialist who has this orientation, or integrative medicine specialist. They're broad classes like that, but who is open-minded to these kind of things, and that's key. And then it's possible to there are tests you can do for metabolic health. We talk about it in the book, simple things like measuring your waist, and then there's some simple blood tests you can do for markers and your height and your weight and things like that. How you feel. There's a Mark Hyman's functional medicine multi-symptom
MSQ.
questionnaire. Yeah. We include that in there also, that people can look at, and because it's just so many of these diseases, whether it's migraine headaches, polycystic ovary disease, irritable bowel syndrome, it just blew me away that they have common causes that are linked to the things that you and I and we're all talking about. And so many people are not aware of them. They go in with a migraine and they get a pill, and they or they we're missing an opportunity to help a lot of people.
So how do people find you? Because like, you've got so much information. I pointed to the book because it's an amazing book, and people
Get it, read it.
People are going to want to know
Thanks.
more.
Yeah, my website is robertlufkinmd.com. And actually, I have a sample chapters you could download if you want to try the book out without buying it, and it'll be in your library as well. And I'm active on social media, and those links are on my website as well also. And I have a podcast that going to get you guys on soon.
Awesome.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes for the people who are listening so they can click into it. I mean, I think this is amazing. That now I'm like, I gotta go prescribe rapamycin for
No, you
you.
don't. You gotta be careful. That's
Right? Don't try this at home.
so first is food, fundamentals, everybody, you gotta get all this other stuff, and then maybe we can talk about rapamycin there.
So we can talk about this after I didn't get up at 3 a.m. I woke up at 3 a.m. last night, like just awake. I was not happy. Not a happy Wendy. So we'll talk about it when I'm not a 3 a.m. human. Okay. So Robert, thank you for being here. This is awesome. I'd encourage everyone to get the book, read the book, go to your site, Robert Lufkin, MD, get the chapter, follow you on all the socials, and subscribe to your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Health Longevity Secrets.
Awesome. All right. Well, you've heard it from Robert Lufkin, MD. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Feel Freaking Amazing podcast. And to the listeners, we hope this was inspiring, educational, and empowering for you. So thanks for joining us. Have an amazing time. And Robert, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Wendy. It's been a real pleasure.
Ours too. Likewise.